Tensions are shifting into high gear between Washington and Tokyo. This isn't just another tariff fight, it's a trade showdown with global consequences. Welcome back to Geoscope, your window into the forces reshaping our world. Today we're unpacking Trump's proposed 25% tariff on Japanese cars, and why Tokyo's negotiators are racing against the clock to prevent a full-blown economic collision. The roots of this conflict stretch back decades to a controversial clause in U.S. trade law. Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 grants the president the authority to impose tariffs on imports deemed a threat to national security. Historically used for strategic materials like steel and aluminum, its application to finished goods from a key ally like Japan marks a dramatic and contentious escalation. Since the pivotal election of late 2024, this once obscure provision has been thrust into the spotlight. The administration initially floated a 10% baseline tariff, a shot across the bow for all trading partners. But the focus has now narrowed and intensified, with a punitive 25% duty aimed squarely at the heart of Japan's export economy, its automotive sector. The official justification for this hardline stance centers on a single, culturally charged commodity: rice. For decades, Japan has fiercely protected its domestic rice market, not just for economic reasons, but as a cornerstone of its national identity and food security. The powerful agricultural lobby, Ja-Zenchu, wields immense political influence, making any concession on rice a near impossibility for any Japanese leader. When Tokyo refused to yield, negotiations collapsed. President Trump seized on the impasse, reviving his familiar rhetoric and branding the entirety of Japanese imports as unfair and predatory. He argues that Japan leverages a closed home market to fuel an export-driven powerhouse that hollows out American industry, a narrative that resonates deeply with his political base. But this narrative of a one-way street of Japanese imports flooding American shores overlooks a crucial, multi-billion-dollar reality. The story is far more complex than simple rhetoric suggests. Major Japanese automakers, not just the giants like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan, but also Subaru, Mazda, and others, have spent the last 40 years deeply embedding themselves within the American manufacturing landscape. They don't just ship cars to the US, they build them here, in sprawling, state-of-the-art facilities known as transplants. These are not mere assembly points, they are epicenters of innovation and production, from the rolling hills of Kentucky and Tennessee to the industrial heartlands of Indiana and Ohio. These American-based operations are a powerful economic engine, directly employing over 100,000 U.S. workers in high-skill, high-wage jobs. The total economic footprint is staggering, generating over $170 billion in annual sales. But the impact radiates far beyond the factory gates. These plants are the anchors of vast and intricate supply chains. A single Toyota Camry assembled in Georgetown, Kentucky, might contain steel from Pennsylvania, electronics from California, seats from Michigan, and glass from Ohio. Thousands of American-owned parts suppliers depend on these factories for their survival. This intricate web means a tariff on a Japanese car is also a tax on American steel, American technology, and American labor. The irony is that under the American Automobile Labeling Act, many of these Japanese cars have higher domestic parts content than some vehicles from Detroit's Big Three. This clash, therefore, isn't a simple case of us versus them. It's a complex, interwoven economic reality facing a blunt political instrument. Japanese automakers are a cornerstone of the U.S. auto industry, controlling nearly half the light vehicle market. Their reputation for reliability is the result of decades of investment and understanding the American driver. But their impact runs far deeper than the dealership lot. In 2023 alone, they built 3.4 million cars in American plants and sold more than 6 million nationwide. These U.S. factories represent billions in investment and support hundreds of thousands of American jobs. The popular Camry or CR-V isn't just an import, it's a product of a deeply integrated supply chain that relies on American labor. It is this intricate economic relationship that now finds itself in the crosshairs of proposed tariffs. If enacted, the policy would trigger an economic shockwave with the consumer's wallet at the epicenter. Industry analysts project that the price of an average vehicle could skyrocket by as much as $4,400. This isn't a simple tax on finished cars. The modern automobile is a global puzzle with thousands of components. A tariff on Japanese parts means even a car assembled in Ohio would see its production costs surge, penalizing the very system of efficient manufacturing that has kept vehicle prices accessible. For the average American family, a $4,400 price hike is a significant financial barrier, potentially pushing a new, safer vehicle out of reach. It translates to higher monthly payments that strain household budgets, forcing difficult choices. This pressure could force many to delay purchases, holding on to older, less safe cars for longer. The ripple effect extends beyond Japanese brands. If a large part of the market sees a price increase, competitors often follow suit, citing their own supply chain pressures. This could lead to broad inflation across the entire automotive sector, reducing choice and affordability for everyone. Faced with these new costs, automakers are backed into an impossible corner. Their first option is to pass the cost increase to the consumer. This protects short-term profits but would certainly lead to a dramatic drop in sales, triggering layoffs at American factories and dealerships. The alternative is to absorb the cost. This would decimate profits, punishing investors, including American pension funds. Critically, it would also starve companies of the capital needed for research and development, the funds that fuel the race for electric vehicles and autonomous driving. In either case, the outcome is damaging for American workers, consumers, and the future of automotive innovation. Over 500,000 American jobs depend on Japanese automakers, nearly 100,000 directly in factories, with hundreds of thousands more in supply chains and local businesses. In states like Kentucky, Alabama, and Mississippi, these jobs make up over 20% of manufacturing. Tariffs could push regional unemployment higher, slash federal revenues, and trigger plant closures that devastate entire communities. America's auto industry relies on a $1.3 trillion supply network, much of it tied to Japanese production systems. Tariffs on engines, batteries, and electronics could double costs and break apart decades-old partnerships. Experts warn this could erode U.S. competitiveness, slow innovation, and weaken the very backbone of North America's industrial capacity. Japanese brands dominate hybrids and small SUVs, the bridge between today's cars and tomorrow's electric future. A 25% tariff could derail that transition, making fuel-efficient cars less affordable and delaying EV adoption, just as the U.S. tries to build momentum. Higher car prices also risk fueling inflation, complicating the Federal Reserve's balancing act. As the July 9th deadline barrels towards us, the air in Washington and Tokyo is thick with tension. This isn't just another date on the calendar, it's a precipice. Behind closed doors, frantic last-ditch negotiations are underway, but on factory floors across America, there's a deafening silence of anticipation. The decisions made now will send shockwaves through an economic partnership that has defined global trade for half a century. The stakes, quite simply, could not be higher. The administration's stated goal is to tackle a persistent trade deficit and reshore manufacturing. But the potential cost of this high-stakes gamble is staggering. We're not just talking about a number, 500,000 jobs. We're talking about the livelihoods of assembly line workers in Ohio, logistics managers in California, and design engineers in Michigan. Beyond the human cost lie the billions in lost corporate and state tax revenue, funds that support our schools and infrastructure. And perhaps most critically, this dispute casts a long shadow over America's clean technology ambitions. Japanese firms are deeply integrated into the supply chain for everything from advanced EV batteries to high-efficiency solar components. A sudden disruption doesn't just slow down the assembly of electric cars, it risks ceding America's fragile leadership in the green energy race to global competitors at the very moment we need to be accelerating. This brings us to the fundamental question: will these tariffs act as a protective shield for American industry, or will they be a self-inflicted wound that sets us back a decade? History offers cautionary tales. We've seen this playbook before, from the disastrous Smoot-Hawley tariffs of the 1930s that deepened the Great Depression, to the auto import quotas of the 1980s, which raised prices for American consumers while doing little to halt the long-term decline of Detroit's dominance. The debate today echoes these past battles, pitting two fundamentally different visions of America's economic future against each other. On one side, proponents argue this is tough medicine, a necessary corrective to decades of globalization that hollowed out the American heartland. They envision a future of resilient domestic supply chains and revitalized manufacturing, freed from dependence on foreign powers. On the other side, critics see a dangerously blunt instrument for a complex, interwoven global economy. They warn that these tariffs will inevitably trigger retaliation, raise prices for families, and starve American factories of the critical components they need to compete. This isn't just an economic squabble, it's a geopolitical test. A trade war with Japan, a cornerstone of American strategy in the Pacific, could weaken a vital alliance, creating a vacuum that other powers, namely China, would be all too eager to fill. So what happens next? Will we see Japanese automakers scale back their multi-billion-dollar investments in the US, shifting production elsewhere and leaving behind a new Rust Belt? Or will the complex web of global supply chains prove more resilient, adapting by absorbing costs and finding workarounds, ultimately passing the bill to the American consumer? The path chosen will define our economic landscape for years to come. What do you believe is the right course of action? Is this protectionism a necessary evil or a catastrophic mistake? Share your thoughts in the comments. The world's economic map is being redrawn before our eyes, and for more in-depth analysis on these critical shifts, don't forget to subscribe to Geoscope.